Welcome to the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast, where we hope to inspire you to embrace your God-given gifts, skills, and passions in order to lead with confidence. We want you to remember that you are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God, and you are fully loved by Him.
You have been designed on purpose by God with unique gifts and passions in order to love and lead those around you. I'm your host, Esther Littlefield, a pastor's wife, business owner, mom, and writer.
And I'm Esther's co-host, Holly Kane. I'm a wife, mom, and business owner. I also write at hollykane.org, where I focus on my passion for women's ministry.
Together, we chat about important issues that Christian women leaders face. In addition, we interview other women just like you who lead in various roles, from church to community to business. Through this podcast, we offer you encouragement, tools, and resources to help you on your leadership journey. We are so glad you're here with us. Hello, friend, and welcome to episode 130. I am here with Holly today, and we are excited to chat with you. We are nearing the end of 2020, which is hard to believe, but we want to kind of end this year with something a little bit different. So in episode 128, we had a conversation with our friend Sandy, and we talked about the idea that we normally do a reflection episode at the end of every year, but this year has been very different, as we know. And so we brought in Sandy so that she could help us work through how to find the good amidst this challenging year. And then last week, you got to hear from Holly with a special solo episode. If you haven't listened to that yet, make sure you do, because it's very themed to this Christmas season and finding peace during this time. So I'm excited for you to hear that if you haven't already. And now we're going to kick off a 3-part series to wrap up this month and this year. So Holly, you want to share a little bit about what we're going to be doing over the next few episodes?
Yeah, so instead of Esther and I doing our normal reflection where we ask questions and discuss the year all in one episode, we're actually going to break it down into 3 shorter episodes where we reflect on 3 different things. We're going to talk about circumstances, relationships, and goals and dreams. And these were the 3 big areas that we covered with Sandy. So we want to take what she shared for wisdom and guidance with us and talk through some of this together.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this. And you mentioned shorter episodes. This is our goal.
Yeah.
But we can't promise anything until after this recording. So we'll see how much shorter it is than usual.
We're going to try.
We are.
Yeah.
All right. And what we really hope that you will do and what these episodes will do for you is that during this season, it can be, a really busy time of year. Typically, people have a lot going on. Of course, this year, again, things are different. So there may not be as many activities. There may not be as many Christmas parties and, outings that you normally would do. But what we hope you'll do is that you will follow along with us and work through and reflect with the questions that we're talking through on these episodes, so that you can just take this time to allow God to speak to you and prepare your heart for what is coming next. Hey friend, it's Esther, and I am actually popping in to interrupt myself in this intro to let you know that we have put together the list of all the questions that Holly and I are working through in this episode and the coming episodes, so that you don't have to worry about trying to jot down the questions or go back and look through the different show notes. You can just grab this PDF and refer to it for yourself as you are processing, reflecting, and then thinking about the coming year. So just head to the show notes to get that PDF. You go to estherlittlefield.com/episode 130 and look for the link or the option to opt in right there and grab that PDF so that you can use that for yourself. Now, if you're already on my email list, don't worry, I will send it out with the email about this episode, so you'll be able to grab it right there. But if you're not, head over to estherlittlefield.com/episode 130. All right, let's pop back into the conversation. So we're going to kick off this episode with the theme of processing our circumstances. All right. So Holly, the first question we have is, how are your circumstances different at the end of 2020 than what you anticipated they would be back in the beginning of the year when you set your goals and planned for the year?
Yeah, so when we were preparing for this, I went back and listened to our episode to see how bright and hopeful I was.
Oh, yeah. I have not done that.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
Well, I skimmed through the episode, but I think it's worth a good listen.
Yeah.
Because just to hear what our mindsets were and what we were thinking and sort of feeling at the time was interesting. So last year, we talked about our word for the year and the different things that we wanted to do. And so last year, my word was like commit or intention, consistent. I wasn't sure. I ended up using commit, but I didn't actually use it. So my word for the year was commit, but I didn't commit to much. So
Okay. Well, it was hard to be committed to things because things kept getting canceled.
It was. So I really had sort of a specific growth plan for my business. I wanted to grow in my education and skills and do some specific learning as far as my business went. And I wanted to be more focused on my offering, just specific business wise. So when I think back on that, I actually did do those things. So I did, get my DOO certification. I did sort of pivot what I'm offering, and I have a very different looking business. From a personal perspective, we didn't really have a church that we were going to. And so this year now, or I should say at the end of this year, we do have a church that we are going to and we're committed to, and we're excited about. They're launching a new location, which we're going to be a part of, sort of starting that and forming that. So that's really exciting. And for me personally, that was a huge sort of disappointment. I don't want to say disappointment. It was difficult. Let's just put it that way. It was difficult for me not to have a specific church that we were going to. And now things feel a lot more hopeful. It's so weird how just that one thing made such a big difference in my life. And I think that goes to show just how much it makes a difference in your life.
Yeah.
So there was that. And then at the beginning of this year, end of last year, my dad had just passed away. And so I was really helping my mom navigate things from far away. And so that was really difficult. We sold her house. We just kind of tried to navigate sort of what her circumstances were going to look like now that she was by herself. And with my sister being away, far away, and us being far away, like she had some really big decisions to make. And one of those was that she moved in with us. So she moved to Florida and now she lives with us, which means that we had to move and she came in. So now this is a whole new sort of lifestyle for us. And not that I would have never said that she would live with us, but that was just not anywhere near what we were thinking. So it's a lot different and it's not bad. It's just so a new life we have to figure out and navigate. So
yeah.
What about you?
All right. So I confessed inadvertently in the episode with Sandy that I totally forgot about my word of the year. So when you put it in the notes for this recording, I was like, oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. And it's kind of hilarious, right? Because my word for 2020 was shift. And little did I know how much would be shifting in the world in 2020. So maybe God was preparing me.
That's good.
And I just didn't actually follow through with sticking with the theme. But anyway, I had some big goals for the year. I wanted to work on a book proposal and get that done and find an agent and do all of that. And that did not happen. So that's one thing that's different, is that really the whole shift that happened in March with everybody staying home and all of the quarantining and all of that really shook up my normal routine of how I work and do my normal schedule at home. Because since I work from home, it wasn't a big change for me to still be at home, but it was a big change, like I shared, to have everybody else in the house with me and my daughter not going to school. And, all of that definitely made it more challenging. Another thing that's different in our family is my husband took an additional job at the school that my daughter attends. He's teaching Bible. And so that's, another way that our schedule and our routine is different. I think that the biggest difference from what I would have expected at the beginning of the year is just the way that the whole church situation looks. And being that my husband is one of the pastors at our church, the difference in how that looks in terms of small groups and meeting together on Sundays and all of that. It's very different. And it's definitely been a challenging season in the sense that I have felt really disconnected in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And so that's been hard. Let's see, what else is different? I didn't know that we were going to get a dog.
That's so
And so that's
exciting.
actually a huge blessing because I had wanted a dog like all at the end of last year. I was ready to get a dog in the fall last year and all of that. My husband wasn't ready. And then once, COVID hit and we were home 24/7, he was finally like, okay, maybe we should get a dog. So anyway, but that's been a blessing, a challenge in some ways. But, I think there's a lot of differences. I had on my goals to get more speaking opportunities.
Mm,
And so obviously, like that's another thing that there was no more in-person events for the rest
mhm.
of the year and all of that. Now I still have been able to get some other opportunities virtually,
Yep.
but it's definitely different. So yeah, that's kind of, some of my personal and business/ministry differences. So I think that one of the things that we talked about with Sandy was this idea. She gave us the advice to try practicing radical acceptance,
Mm.
right? And so she gave us 3 specific questions that we can ask God as we work through this. So do you want to kick us off with the first one there?
Yes. So I do want to say, I think that for me, it's such a good reminder to practice radical acceptance because I am very much a denier. Like if I don't like something that's going on or it's not what I thought it was going to be or if it's truly hard for me to change, then I'm like I deny it, that it's
Yeah.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not helpful, right? Like it doesn't help me actually get through anything. So it's a good reminder to go, okay, this is where I am instead of actually fighting it, which doesn't help anybody. Let's just try to accept it and move on.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder for
Mhm.
me. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first question that Sandy gave us to kind of work through this was, who would you like to be for me in 2020? And this is questions that we're asking God. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. So I was thinking about this and I thought back to a call I was on recently with the Confident Leader Catalyst group that I was running. And I had a special workshop with Jenny Randall, and she was sharing some thoughts about discerning God's call for our lives and things like that. And at one point, she just put this question out there and she said, "Is God enough?" And this just
Mm,
kind of like, those moments where you're like, "Oh, you have that
yeah.
that conviction that Holy Spirit is like, okay, this is time for you to listen up." And I realized, I think that the whole year has been kind of about this question. Is God enough for me? This is
Yeah.
where I have felt. So processing is God enough if everything else gets stripped away? If my church gets stripped away, if we can't meet for months on end, if we can't get together with friends, if I can't see the people that I care about, even if my comfort and freedoms get stripped away, and if I lose those things, if there's conflict and division within my own family, you know? And so I feel like God was kind of saying to me, and who he wants to be for me right now is he wants to be enough for me. Like he wants
Yeah.
me to know that he's enough and that I don't need anything else. Ultimately, he's what I need. And without him, I really don't have what I need. So
Mm.
that's my answer. What about you?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like I totally see that and understand that because for me, that was 2019, 18. When we moved here, it felt like everything was stripped away. And so like, what is my identity? Who is God for me in this? What's this going to look like now that because when you get into those sort of rhythms, sometimes those things take the place of God a little bit and we don't realize it. It may not be intentional, but when all of that stuff is taken away, you really kind of see what's left. And so that was 2019 for me. And so as I was kind of going into this year and figuring out what's left over, what does that look like? Is God enough in that? For me, I sort of struggled with what does a consistent relationship with God look like? And yes, I'm talking about from a habits perspective, but also just enjoying God. Like, I don't enjoy habits. I don't. I do them because I have
We've
to.
talked about that before.
I do them because I have to. And so for me, it was like, I just really felt like I was going through the motions, not doing them, not sitting down to pray or read my Bible because I enjoyed it, but because it was a habit I was supposed to do. And I think that was kind of birthed out of the previous year where I was like, okay, all this other stuff is stripped away. So now it's just me and you, God. And so like I dove sort of headfirst into, okay, I'm just going to like do this sort of one-on-one thing. And it was more about the habits than it was about the relationship. And I'm not saying that he wasn't, because he's gracious and he's merciful. And so he definitely showed up in that for me because I was being consistent and seeking him. But at the same time, it was a checklist is basically all I'm trying to say with that. And so that sort of realization and kind of coming to understand that, okay, well, where's the enjoyment in this? This relationship should have an element of joy and should have an element of me just wanting to be in his presence. And it felt like it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And then secondly, and this is kind of part of, that whole evolution is I realized that when I can't serve in church, it's very difficult for me. I think that for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, but they can have different pitfalls than sort of how I experience this. But my service through church is part of my relationship with God. And I think that is what it should be anyway. But a lot of people do it as something that they're doing for him. But for me, it is part of our relationship. And it is a way that I express my love towards him and a way that I feel like we're working together to do this. Like it's ultimately his work, but I get to be a part of it. And it's the lens through which I'm able to see him working in my life. And so without that service, I've had to look closer at my everyday life to figure out where he's working there. And that was harder for me because for whatever reason, that's how I relate to him. So does that make sense? I know that sounds okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. All right. So the second question that Sandy gave us to ask God is, what would you like to do in me through it? So what would you say to that, Holly?
Yeah. So I think part of the reason that I got to the place that I was at was comparison and comparing what other people said about their relationship with God and sort of condemning myself for not having the same type of relationship. So it's similar to like if there's jealousy between siblings about a relationship with a parent, well, that parent does this with them, but they don't do that with me, rather than looking for the stuff that the parent does with me, if that makes sense. And so I need to stop the game of comparison and I need to instead spend that energy looking for what that special relationship is for me. And it's not like it's not there. It's just I've been so consumed with, have I read through the Bible completely, like enough times? Should I do it every year? Like, I've heard of these people talk about how the fact that they like picture God sitting directly in front of them and they have this conversation. And like, I've tried that and it was weird. Like, but these are all things that I need to create for myself. Yeah. And I need to figure out what this looks like for me. And it's, I can't just rest on the laurels of what I've done over the years in this relationship. Like I need to go deeper, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. So, and look for enjoyment in that relationship. And so, yeah, I guess it's an open hands kind of moment for me to just say like, okay, what's this going to look like? Like all the basic pieces are there. Like what's the extra special sauce? What's the awesome sauce that is just for me and you? So.
Yeah.
So what about you?
So I think that for me, it's really been what God has been doing in me through this year is showing me the importance of slowing down and actually being able to be still and, not like kind of like what you're saying, like not just doing that to have a checkbox thing that I did it, but like that it's actually beneficial and necessary and healthy to do this. And also realizing that this is not a race, like our lives, yes, it's important how we spend our time. It's important the way that we use our gifts to serve him, but it's also not like a competition or a race, and that sometimes God's timing is going to be different than mine. And that's good. Like, that's probably better than
Yeah.
what mine would be. Not probably, it is better. And so it kind of takes that pressure off of having to have everything figured out. And,
Mm.
I like to have things planned and have
Yeah.
and know what's going to happen, or at least know what I'm going to do to make things happen the way that I think they're supposed to happen. And sometimes he just wants me to like rest and just chill
Mm.
out. And I feel like that is what this year has been for me. Is there's still been a lot of things that I've done, but like there's been a lot of just stopping or slowing down on a lot of stuff.
Mm.
So that's been
Yeah.
my journey. So
It's so interesting how, I don't know, I feel like he is sort of bringing us all, this sounds really strange, but bringing us all to the same kind of point where he's like, remember, it's just about me and you. Remember that? Like, all this other stuff is important, but the most important thing is me and you. And I don't know. Anyway. So the third question in this is, how would you like me to respond? And I'm so glad we talked with Sandy about this one, because if you remember in the episode, I was like, well, what if that's so scary? What if you're scared to answer that question? And she said to us, like, if he's good, then he's going to be good through this too. And so, yeah, anyway, I would love to hear your thought on that.
Okay. Yeah. So when I thought about this and just thinking about how God would want me to respond, I think he wants me to respond by being still.
Yeah.
And just by resting in him and knowing that he's got this thing. Like, there's a lot of things, I think, related to the church situations, related to, friendships, related to work stuff. There's just so much that's uncertain right now.
Mm.
And it's easy for us to feel like just concerned, worried. I have to figure this out. I need to plan. I need to prepare. And I think he's just like, to me, just be still, just be okay. The verse, be still and know that I am God. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I feel like I need to do. And I had this funny, quick little story that I want to tell you. The other day I was sitting on the couch and we let our dog on the couch, and she gets up on the couch and she snuggles with me. Well, there was one day where it was like she couldn't get close enough to me. She kept pushing herself further and further. Her head was coming onto my lap and then coming up around my neck. And like, she was leaning back on me, and just like, it was like she couldn't get close enough. And she just wanted to be there and just snuggle.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like that's like a really weird analogy, but like, I feel like that's sometimes like God is like, come just be with me.
Yeah.
Don't do anything. You don't have to accomplish anything. You can just be here and just like be comfortable with me. So that's
I love that. I don't think
answer.
it's a weird analogy. I think it's a really good analogy.
Although it is hard when you're sitting there and you're trying to like use your computer on your lap, and then the dog is just like moving across your lap. Yeah, she makes it hard sometimes. All right. What about you, Holly? How do you feel you would answer this question?
So I think that for me, I need to be more aware of the little things that he's working in my life and see those as really treasured and special, rather than just measuring our relationship on the sort of bigger mountaintop experiences, and seeking to find joy in every day, like sort of waking up every day and going, okay, what are you going to do today? Like, where can I be looking for you today? And if you 100 million years ago did the Bible study Experiencing God, that was big, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, that was one of the pieces, was looking for what God was doing in the everyday life and what he's, even the small mundane things. I tend to not, and this is perhaps just my personality, I don't see those as valuable, or I tend not to give them as much value as the big stuff. And I think perhaps that's why the sort of relationship was just a checkbox, like the habits of it was just a checkbox, was because I wasn't giving enough value to those little things. And so it's a perspective change, and it is a curiosity that I have yet to allow myself to have. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of that's kind of where it is to just be curious, like, what can you do in this small thing and how can I appreciate and grow closer to you based on those little things?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So those were the questions that Sandy gave us. And we
Yeah.
have a couple more that we want to hit on before we wrap up this conversation about circumstances. So I would love to know, what do you do, Holly, to when your circumstances feel hopeless or devastating? Is there anything that you cling to, any practices, any truths, any scriptures that help you get through those moments? Because I think all of us in this year, have experienced at some point some kind of hopeless or devastation, but some people have experienced that to an extreme
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
And, I feel like I'm ending the year in a place where I'm in a fairly okay place. I don't
Yeah.
have any personally devastating situations going on right now. It's just been a frustrating year overall. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But like for some people, they may be right now listening and saying, I don't know how I'm going to make it in
Yeah.
the next few weeks or the next few months. So what do you cling to in those times?
Yeah. So the first thing, and I'm basing this a lot on sort of the journey that I took when my dad was passing away and sort of that devastating, really sort of, it wasn't hopeless, but it felt really awful. But anyway, so the things that sort of carried me through that was thinking about the ways that God has cared for me in the past and how he's been faithful. And honestly, like any time that I'm having a hard time with anything, whether it be frustrating or whether it be devastating, wherever I am on that spectrum, that's the first thing I do is I remind myself of what God's done in the past. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work to get started, but once you get started, it's really easy. They just kind of come rolling back really fast. And so for me, how God carried me through that time with my dad and other things before, I remember how faithful he was. I remember how present he was. I remember how comforting he was in those times. And so that really kind of gets me through. The other thing is I remind myself who I am and who he is. So my identity in Christ as well as who God is. And so whether I am making all this money and everyone is sort of fat and happy and like everything is going amazing, he is no different
Yeah.
than if I have no dollars to my name and things are awful, like truly totally devastatingly awful. He is no different. And so I remember that those are things that I can stand fully on. There are so many things in life that are shaky or the rug gets pulled out from under you, but I can always count on the fact that God is good, that he's faithful, that he wants the best for me, that he loves me. Like I can count on those things and they will never ever change. And that's the same thing about what he says about me. Those things will
Right.
never change. And so for me to be able to kind of look at those across the spectrum of life is really sort of centering and grounding when you feel kind of taken away by the waves of whatever storm you're in. And then the last thing for me is to just get around other believers who can encourage me, and not even that I need them to say something mind blowing, but just when you've been around someone who's really weathered some stuff and they can really sit in life in a really sort of content and peaceful way, it's those people that encourage me. Like I think of Zach's grandmother who had been through multiple house fires where she literally only escaped with the clothes on her back. She went through that multiple times and with kids, and she lost
Wow.
2 husbands. And, she just, these are the type of people that I try to get around when I'm in those places because they've weathered really rough storms and their faith encourages me. So, yeah. So,
Love
what
that.
about you?
Yeah, my first one is very much same as yours is, reflecting on the ways that God has come through in the past. And a lot of times that involves like looking back through journals, reading back through, prayers that he has answered. And just, I think, reminding myself, like, we've talked about the truth of who he is, that he's always faithful. Like that is what I know, is that he's always faithful. And so in the moments when it feels like I don't know how we're going to get through this season, whatever might be going on, I can hold on to the fact that I know he's with me and I know he's faithful.
Mm.
So that's one. For me, I often find that, reading the Psalms is really helpful as well. I mean, obviously all of scripture is helpful, but in particular, if I'm in a dark place, I find those reading the Psalms to be encouraging, because I like reading when David is also like, life is horrible.
Yeah.
Everything stinks, and I'm just like, okay, he gets it. But then he's also like, and bless the Lord, oh my soul,
Yeah.
And so it's finding a way to still give glory to God, even in those dark moments. And then I also put down worship music, just I'm bad at like listening to worship music just on an everyday basis, because I'm usually either working or like listening to podcasts. But in those times, especially when things are difficult, I know that is something I can turn to really be an encouragement and kind of lift up my spirit. So those are the things that I cling to.
Yeah, I like those. I like that we had some similarities, but some differences too.
Yes.
Because everyone's different and everyone needs different things. So one of the last questions that we want to talk about is, how have you found good in this year despite the circumstances? Or what's something that has come as a result of the different or even difficult circumstances? And I think this question really is the whole reason that we wanted to do the episode with Sandy and kind of all of this, is that I don't know about you, but I'm hearing all kinds of negativity about like 2020 is the new swear word or whatever.
Yes.
And so you and I really want to take a different perspective of like, what good is there and what joy can we find? So I'd love to hear your answer.
Yeah. So I think it's funny because it's very similar to one of the things you said earlier. But for me, it's been just really trying to appreciate the little things, and like, I guess not trying to, but like actually taking the time to appreciate the little things, because so much of our normal routine has been shifted and changed. So like the little things of like being able to meet up with a friend and go for a walk, or, snuggling on the couch with my daughter watching virtual church during the time where we were doing that. Like that was something different, and it was also very precious and good, even though the situation that caused it wasn't good.
Right.
The thing that was happening was good. And then I think too, slowing down, and like I mentioned, that's one of the things that's been a theme for me. But like, I love bird watching, as you know. And you don't really like birds, but I got into this thing over the summer where I was going out every day for like 20 minutes and just sitting on my deck and watching the birds. And it was so much fun, but also so good, because it was like, oh my goodness, this is what it's like to just sit and do nothing. Like, just enjoy being. And I'm just not good at that. I'm not good at just enjoying being, And so it was a little thing that probably, if all the other things of this year hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't have ended up doing that. But it was like this trend that was going on in the bird watching world.
There's one of those. Is there a bird watching world?
There is a whole world of people that are really into bird watching.
That's not where I'm going to be.
No, but it's because people couldn't go out and bird watch out of their houses and other places so much. There was this thing called slow birding, and it was like, stay at home and just observe the birds that you can see in your own backyard.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was doing. Now that it's getting colder, I'm not doing it as much because I don't like being cold, but I'm still enjoying them from inside.
You have a good vantage point, because from your couch, you can see right out the window, and you can be cozy.
True. But there are a lot of birds that don't come to bird feeders, Holly. And so you can see a lot more if you're looking up in the trees or other places.
Okay. See, I'm thinking like of being safe and protected in the house while you're watching the birds. That I can get on board with. Sitting out there with them, that's not a thing for me. But I'm glad, because I know how much you love that, and I know how excited you get. So
it was just kind of it was a good thing to come from this year that I don't think I would have done if it hadn't been for this whole kind of shut down.
Right.
All right, Holly. So tell us, what about you? What are some of the good things that you found in this year, despite the circumstances?
Okay. So, yeah, I think a lot of you have the same thing happen to you, but we have been home together a lot more. And I was kind of in the same boat as Esther, where I worked from home and I was by myself, which honestly sounds a little glorious right now. But, I forgot how much I missed my family when they were gone. And so having my husband home working, having my son doing school virtually, I mean, we were literally on top of each other. And so to some extent that was good, but to some extent that was also bad. But we are looking for the good. So our family is a lot closer. I do feel like we are a lot closer to each other from having this experience. And I think that it clarified a lot of values for our family. And so, kind of what I mean by that is watching how people have sort of drawn the line in the sand about what they believe or stuck a flag in the ground and said, here's where I'm kind of standing on. And sort of that divisiveness we've been able to talk about. And especially having people within our own family that we don't necessarily agree with, we've been able to have those conversations with my son. And so we've been able to really clarify our values even that much more as a family. It's been kind of a lightning rod, if you will, for us, the circumstances of this year and just the climate of everything. And those are really valuable conversations that I don't know if we would have had. And I'm really glad that we did, to say, like, well, we might agree with this person, but this is not how we would have said it, or this is not the approach that we would take. And here's why. We got to have a lot of those conversations. And then the last thing I think for me, and this is kind of interesting, but it kind of took the temperature of our home, if that makes sense. When you kind of get everybody in and it's just sort of this really more intense kind of time together, you can really see where the sort of kinks and the bumps are and where you kind of rub each other a little bit. And for me, it was kind of like, what do we actually need to work on still? Like, what are the things that we can do better as a family? And so that kind of really took the temperature of our home, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that, we did anything amazing in regards to fixing it, but at least we know sort of what's happening. And I guess just a lot of things came to light. And so I am grateful for those, even though they might be hard things or not fun things to work on. So
awesome. Well, that was such a good conversation. And I hope that everybody listening, I hope you'll take time to sit down and answer these questions right along with us this week. So we are going to wrap up, as we usually do, with a fun question. I do want to say that my dog is outside barking because I let her out and now she wants to come back in. And it's almost lunchtime and she's really just being a brat. So
we can do it.
If you are hearing a faint bark in the background, it's Allie begging to come inside. So, but our question to wrap us up, our fun question, Holly, is what food have you never eaten but would really like to try?
So my answer is going to be a little weird, but that's okay. I put this in there and then I never thought about what it was. So I actually have two answers. So I am an adventurous eater. I will try lots of things. And so a couple of years ago, when I went on my very first cruise, I got to try escargot and that was really yummy. And I didn't think I would like it. But the reason I'm saying that is because I think that I would like to try more like shellfish seafood, like that type of range of area, like that I haven't tried. There's lots of stuff I have tried, but like I've never had, is it oysters that you eat like raw? You just like shuck them and swallow them? I would love to try that. It sounds really gross, but there's lots of things that I've thought that were really gross and then I really liked them. Right. And then the second thing, which you're going to think that it's really weird too, maybe, is pretty much every weird wacko thing that they make on the Great British Baking Show that we don't have here in the States. Like I want to try all the weird things that are foreign to us. Like they're not actually probably like, I mean, there are lots of people's like home type of things, but like they're very foreign to the United States. And so I want to try all those. And there's like this thing where people bake a pie and then they put it inside a cake. And then there's all these layers. Like there's so many like pastry baking things I've never tried that I really want to try. But I think it's because I love to bake that I have that sort of. But anyway. Okay, what about you?
Okay. This was a really hard question, Holly.
Yeah?
You picked this question, and like I'm like, okay, so here's the thing. I am also an adventurous eater.
Yep.
I was horrible when I was a kid. Like I didn't eat any. I was so picky.
Yeah.
And so I have hope for my daughter because she's also very picky.
Yep.
And I'm just like, okay, someday she's going to be willing to try foods because now I will try almost anything. I think missions trips do that to you when you go and you basically have the choice of eating this food or completely offending them, you know, or starving. Like you choose to eat it. And so I was having a hard time thinking of like what I feel like I just try the food that I want to try. Like, unless it's something super crazy expensive. So the thing I thought of, which is not one that I actually really want to try, but I would be willing to try should the opportunity arise.
Maybe
is caviar. Like I've never had caviar. So I was like, well, it's supposed to be a delicacy and super wonderful, right? So I'm not super into like, I mean, I do eat sushi, but I typically don't eat like the raw sushi and like I don't do a lot of raw foods. So like the oyster thing, it kind of looks like phlegm. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be into that. But I guess I would probably try caviar if I was like at a fancy restaurant and somebody wanted to buy it for me.
So I have to tell you that there's a restaurant around you that has something with caviar in it. And I've only had it as a garnish.
Oh, okay.
So I'll tell you what it is and you can try it.
Okay.
But
okay, cool.
Yes, I've never had like a spoonful of it, right? You know what I mean? Or like a, you know, just it alone on a cracker, let's say.
Right.
But I have had it as a garnish. So it's something you got to try at the very least. But
okay. On the next question, I want to ask, what's a food that you've tried that you never want to have again?
Oh, I can tell you what that is right now.
We're not going to do it right now. We're going to save it for next time.
Oh my gosh.
I know what mine is right off the bat too. So if you're listening, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on this important life-altering conversation at the end of our next conversation. Okay, friends? All right. That is it for today. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast. And we will be back next week to do our next reflection episode. Hi, friend. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. We're so glad you took the time out of your day to listen, and I truly hope that it made an impact on your ability to lead well. If it did, would you consider sharing this episode with a friend? You could take a screenshot of the episode and share it on your social media, maybe an Instagram story or on Facebook, or you could just text the link to a friend. We would truly appreciate that, as when you share with a friend, it helps spread the word about the podcast and it helps more women to be able to be impacted so that they can lead and love others well. Now, don't forget, your leadership matters, and it's time for you to embrace your gifts and lead with confidence.
What's happening? Okay. Remember when I used to be able to podcast? Okay. Try it. It's literally so easy. I don't know what my problem is. Okay.